Trafficking victims do more than just sex work. In fact, the majority are forced laborers in all kinds of industries, from construction to agriculture or housekeeping. In a Seattle suburb, one woman from East Africa was tricked and ended up working here as virtually a domestic slave. Sadly, her story is somewhat typical, back in her home country, which is where this all began. There, she took care of a wealthy woman's house. They got along so well that the woman asked her to go to the U.S. and work for her relatives, who were also from the same country. But she said no. She didn't want to leave her kids. Her boss persisted, but she kept refusing. Then the woman offered to put her daughters in boarding school.
Boarding school back home is very important, especially for girls. So I said, that sounds good. Putting my children in boarding school and coming to visit them, oh, that's a good idea.
So the family organized her documents and brought her all the way to Seattle. But things were bad. Her duties far exceeded those of the job back home. She took care of a 2-year-old and a baby, and all of the family's meals, cooking, cleaning, gardening.
I was responsible for everything except that only that body they wash by themselves, but I was responsible for everything.
She worked almost 100 hours a week. The couple paid her $70 a month and insisted she talk to no one.
Why did these people do this to me? It really made me sad when I remember this story.
But eventually, this woman did get away, and she got in touch with an immigration attorney. Charges were even brought against the couple she worked for, and she was able to recover her proper wages. That's a rare good outcome for these kinds of cases. Eric Brightsky heads the Human Trafficking Unit for U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. He says human trafficking is one of the most hidden crimes in the U.S.
We're dealing with foreign-born victims who are often in the United States illegally, may not speak the language, come from a country where their cultural norms and mores are different, where there may be social caste systems in place, and where law enforcement may be generally distrusted. A threat against a family member, what about a threat against a child who's left in a home country? We want to make the light bulb go off and to recognize that something might be going on here that they need to follow up with.
The woman who went through it all, she's made a new life for herself. She has a job in healthcare, and after years without seeing her kids, they're finally together again.
Katarina Rosenblatt says she was only 13 when her mother, escaping an abusive relation, took her to live in a hotel in Miami Beach. She remembers her mother worked long hours and she wandered alone.
Soon enough, there was a trafficking ring that spotted my vulnerability, being alone, having low self-esteem coming from a dysfunctional home life. You know, they spotted that. And so there was an older girl that recruited me, and she came up to me as a big sister. And so she was 19 and thin and pretty and everything I thought I wanted to be.
Kat says the girl's name was Mary, and she had a plan.
She introduced me to her pimp, and I didn't know he was a pimp. I didn't know he was a scam artist at the time. I thought he was just a nice man, like a father.
Soon after, she remembers finding herself inside a hotel room, dressed as a bride, convinced she was playing a game. She remembers the locked door and drugs on the table.
This guy who was half dressed with a beer belly hanging out, ready to partake in his transaction. He had negotiated the price with Mary. I should say 20 years ago, the price was $550 for a virgin girl.
Kat says that time she managed to talk and plead her way out of this situation. But soon after, she says she was tricked again, this time by a friend's father.
It came in a place that you would never suspect it, and that was in my middle school. I was in 7th grade, and they blindfolded us and took us to a brothel in Broward County from Miami to Broward. They had paid her father $40 for each of us.
She doesn't remember how long she was there for and how many men came by.
And they let me know what would become of me if I ever told anyone. They told me that they knew where I lived, they knew who my teachers were, they knew what school, they knew everything about me. There was nothing I could do to protect myself, and at 14 years old, I didn't even know where to begin.
She dropped out of school and became addicted to drugs. Prostitution didn't seem so foreign anymore. She met up with a pimp. Her dreams were crushed.
I'm nothing but a drug addict and I guess a prostitute for these guys. At 15, I had given up on myself. I belonged to the street. I belonged to whoever would show me kindness or give me cocaine.
More than 20 years ago, a drug overdose and a customer with AIDS scared her so much she ran away from that life and never looked back. It was not until recently that she dared to tell her story. Her motivation was to help girls in her same situation. Now, Kat works along law enforcement to help them better understand the industry. She also started an organization that provides shelter, support, and counseling to victims of trafficking. The name, There Is Hope for Me. Adriana Hauser, CNN, Miami.
interesting that most girls feel a very strong disconnect, because this is not just happening to poor girls, okay?
It's not.
No. Oh, no. This is not just happening. I'm telling you,
I would have thought it was sort of poor, as you say, girls who are being sold by their moms.
No. I've met 4 young girls who are actually attending Berkeley College who have been trafficked, who come from very, very nice, seemingly very stable family backgrounds, who got caught up in trafficking and just feeling a disconnect at home.
Wow.
Yeah. So I think it's very important that we keep that connection, we keep that communication with our youth. I think a lot of times our kids get to a certain age and we feel like, oh, they're doing that.
Right.
You know, you have to keep that communication, and it is a must. You couldn't believe the stories that I've heard about girls who've been trafficked who will go to, or asked by a girlfriend, hey, after school we're going to go to this party. And they go to some place far out in the suburbs, and, you know, they're having a good time, and they get drugged, and next thing you know, they wake up and they have these pictures of themselves, you know, in sexual acts that they don't remember. And the guy says, you come back here tomorrow, or this picture is going to be all over the internet, and I know where your mother works. So you have girls who go to school, after school, 3 to 9, they're at this place with this guy that's holding them, you know, blackmailing them with these pictures.
How common is that? How I mean, it sounds so...
Doesn't it?
Yes.
But see,
yes.
the thing...
And you're talking about here in the United States.
We're talking about here in the United States, and it's I'm trying to give you an understanding of the methods that are used, these invisible chains that are used to entrap these young girls and young boys, okay? And so there are different methods, and when we talk about slavery, people are so used to, you know, chains and a whip. It's a whole different scene right now, and that's actually a true story. It was a whole ring of young girls from this particular high school that were being trafficked, and it took one girl to be brave enough to tell her mother. I'll tell you a very sad story. I'll tell you another one. 23-year-old gang member arrested for trafficking 4 14-year-olds. 2 of them decide that they're going to roll on them, basically tell. He puts a hit out on 2 of them. One's missing. We can't find her. And so now, if we can't provide protection for people who are willing to stand up against, you know, these traffickers, nobody's going to testify. Nobody's going to testify. So that's another issue that we have to deal with as well. Our girls, they need shelter and they need protection.